All right, well, welcome everybody to this exciting, just hour-long experience with being able to talk to Dr. James Lane about what lies ahead for Nova Schools. We want this to be interactive. I want you to learn a little bit about what's going on in the trenches or down in the ground of Northern Virginia, and also what's kind of looks like it's on the horizon as well for Northern Virginia schools. But first, before we get started, I want to say, first of all, my name is Tucker Wanamaker. I am kind of your MC tonight, but we're going to have a lot of people talking. And I'm actually a board member, as well as I have kids, 4 kids, in fact, in Arlington schools. And so I am a parent, I am a board member, and I believe wholeheartedly in the work of communities and schools in Northern Virginia. But what I want to open up with for today is I want you to reflect for just a moment. Take about 30 seconds. And I want you to reflect on what is the one thing that you have most appreciated about our community in Northern Virginia from the last week. What is one thing that you have most appreciated about our community over the last week? So just think about that for a minute, something you most appreciated. And when you know what it is, go and just pop it in the chat and let everybody just sort of hear what you appreciate about our community. Just take a few moments. Pop that in the chat. What do you most appreciate about our community? We'll just take again, 30 seconds here.
You got everyone, and then you.
Awesome, thanks, Fernanda. Friendship of my neighbors around me. That's great. What else? Let's pop in the chat. What do you most appreciate about our community over the last week? Awesome, Lisa. How Old Town and how helpful everyone is. Dominique, many helping hands.
You have to help me. I've written in the chat, but I can't get it to send.
Just hit the enter button. That should be able to do it for you, Elizabeth. No problem.
The which button?
Just hit enter or return.
Oh, okay.
Darian, unity over shared experiences. That's great. Bob Woody, the newfound friendliness of people. Rula, a sense of unity and support between people. Lucinda, my neighbors and the sense of community. Elizabeth, there you go. McLean, longtime friends. That's great. Good job, Elizabeth.
Spelled my name. I love it.
What else? Maybe just a few more once you pop up in there. What's something you just really appreciate right now about our community that you've seen over the last week? Sense of community, block parties. Oh, I'm assuming socially distant block parties is probably how it is, right? With masks on. Absolutely, that's right, Martine. Our kids, Terry Welter, yes, our kids. Grant, words of kindness and appreciation. Seeing communities come together, no matter the race, age, or otherwise. Well, thank you all for putting those in. If you haven't put yours up there, go ahead and pop it up there. And the reason why we're doing this is just to give us a sense to Tom, lack of traffic, that's awesome. Is just to get a sense of, partly just to get us grounded in the room a little bit today. We're going to be learning a little bit about, again, what's going on and what does the potential future look like as well. But we want to just get a sense of, we're a community-based organization and we really deeply care about this community, and we want to hear what you care about your community, what you most appreciate. So thanks for taking just a few moments to just reflect on what it is that we appreciate about what's going on. There's a lot of hard times, a lot of crazy times going on, but if we can start with a little bit of appreciation and just gratitude, we always love to start that way. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Patrick. Patrick Brennan, he is the founding executive director of Communities and Schools of Northern Virginia. He has actually lived in this area for more than 20 years, right, Patrick? More than 20 years. He is a former teacher, so he has been boots on the ground for a while before he was the executive director. And one of the things that he is most passionate about, and I love, Patrick, that I see this in you every time we have board meetings and consistently throughout, is your concern and your drive to make sure that there is equity for all students in Northern Virginia and to be able to have access to what they need to live successful lives. So anyway, he has two kids himself. He has a boy and a girl that have grown up in Arlington schools, and he is one who cares deeply about this community. And so without further ado, I just want to hand it over to you, Patrick, and let's go from there.
Great. Well, thanks, Tuck. I really appreciate it, and it's great to see some faces. It's I think it's been a little bit of time for all of us. I was just telling Tucker I got a little grief from my son because I actually, for the first time in a very long time, actually trimmed my beard. I was getting a little, you know, rough. But it's been obviously a pretty challenging time. And a lot of our own relationships, I'm sure, have been put to the test by being sort of sequestered into our houses. But I'm here to talk a little bit about the work that Communities in Schools has been doing, not just for the last 7 years here in the community, but also really to focus on a lot of the good work that's been happening these last 3 months with a lot of my site coordinators who I see here, which is great. They haven't been sequestered. They've been out working very hard to keep connected with our students and our families. And so thank you all for coming. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with many of you and hearing from many of you. I guess really because things are so extraordinarily challenging, right, between the pandemic and obviously with some real challenges around racial justice and the killing of George Floyd. I think it's really probably important to start off with just sort of a couple sort of statements of what we believe in Communities in Schools, as Community Schools in Nova, that I think are relevant to those issues and to what we're going to be talking about tonight. The first is we believe that access to education is a justice issue. That has been sort of founded in the work that Bill Milliken started in the 1960s and continues. And we also believe that every child, regardless of circumstances, deserves the support they need to have access to that education. And that cannot happen alone. As Tucker was saying, I come out of the classroom and I think that the schools in Northern Virginia are very good. And I've seen exceptional teachers make exceptional impacts on our families and our students, but they can't do it alone. And so there is a shared responsibility that I really love about Communities in Schools and hope that you continue and support us in that, is that it's a shared responsibility to make sure that schools, parents, community, everyone's involved in making sure every kid has that access that they need. I'm particularly proud and I'm looking forward to having you guys listen and talk with some of my site coordinators tonight. You'll see in a minute a little short video of some of the work they've been up to, and also have a chance at the end of the day to be able to go into some breakout rooms with them and just speak with them and ask them any questions that might come to mind. So thank you all for coming. Just to give you a little sense of what we're in for the next little bit of under an hour, first I was talking about the videos. It's about a 3-minute video of our site coordinators working with students. Really, since the closure, as you can imagine, some of the students that we work with are under-resourced to begin with. That could be through language, culture, poverty, what have you. First gen, second language. A lot of our families, we use the school to sort of coordinate services. So when the schools closed, it was really the strength of the relationships that were already established, that the site coordinators already had these trusting relationships before the closure to be able to continue to reach out and stay connected with our families. It's really been a source of real pride for me and for our organization to know that we've established that level of trust to be able to continue to find and support our families over these last 3 months. So after that, we're going to have a conversation and talk with the state superintendent, James Lane. He is, I collected some questions from many of you. I'm going to encourage you also to take the lesson that Tucker just gave you and be able to sort of submit some more questions. We have him, I hope, for about 20 minutes to a half hour, depending, to be able to address some of your questions. If we don't get to him, I've got promises from him and you got promises from me that we will follow up and address any of the things that we didn't have time for tonight. But the superintendent of schools for the state, as many of you may know, they just released what is sort of the guidelines for local schools and reopening schools. I believe Caitlin is going to send that back out to you if you don't already have it, along with a bio of Superintendent Lane. So we'll have some time with the Q&A with him. And then we're going to talk, obviously, about going forward and the value of CIS and the need to continue and ask for your support to be able to make sure that we stay and the investment that we made in the lives of staying in the lives of our families continues throughout the next school year. So as part of this will be an ask for your support. And then finally, one of the one of the very many benefits I have. So Community Schools is a national network and we're a local affiliate, but our secret is that we have the founder that lives with us in Arlington, Bill and Jean Milliken. And so I've asked Bill to be able to speak a little bit briefly, kind of bring us back from the larger state and the larger issue of education to bring us back to really what we believe is the foundational piece of CIS, which is that relational piece between the site coordinator and the student, and why that's so valuable. So that's sort of the bit of the run that we're going to have, and you'll hear some student voices and have opportunities to engage. So I really look forward to being able to have this time with you. So what we'll do is we'll queue up this video. It's about 3 minutes long. And what you'll see again is you'll see our site coordinators work over the last 3 months, really focusing in on a series of things, supplying basic needs to our families. We work elementary, middle, and high school. So some of the work you'll see is dealing in front of elementary and middle and high schools themselves and talking with those our site coordinators talking virtually with some of those populations. So they're going to talk a little bit about the basic needs and being able to make sure people are safe in their homes and have what they need. Also around social emotional and around this idea of what's it like. We all been challenged with being sort of closed in during this pandemic, and how do you help kids make the adjustments they need to be able to continue their learning at home? And you'll learn the value of creating your own jitter jar. So pay attention and listen for that one. That could help maybe a few people that are listening. And finally in the video, again, it's only 3 minutes long. Finally in the video, you'll see our efforts to make sure students are connected digitally. That means Chromebooks and hotspots. Northern Virginia, again, is quite good, but there are gaps, and prosperity and resources are not everywhere. And so we've really been able to help both the basic, the emotional, and then the technological supports that are needed over these last 3 months. So please take a listen, and I'll see you on the side. Caitlin, could you maybe cue it up for us?
I got it for you. Here we go.
Thanks, Tucker.
Those who are on phones, you should be able to hear the sound, and it's just as good as well. So hold on. Here we go.
With the recent school closures, our relationships with the students is even more crucial.
Since schools closed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, families have been in crisis mode, particularly a lot of the children that I serve through communities and schools.
Some of them have lost the ability to get the easily accessible food that they would have at school, and we try and make sure that they have that at home.
This has been a challenging week for our kids as they're home, but we're trying to help them get through it the best that we can.
Today I'm back in my office. Even though the school is empty, I'm here putting together hygiene kits and food bags that I can send home to some of my case-managed families.
We just want to make sure that even when meals aren't being served, that all of our students still have food, and that families feel supported even though the school is closed.
Hey communities of school students, it's Mr. Day here, and we want to remind everyone to remember to stay active. Now, whether that's with a basketball, running around your neighborhood, or whatever you've got lying around the house, just keep moving.
I think that being home every day can be kind of stressful. Today, we're going to talk about how you can have a take a break space at home by creating your own jitter jar. For me, I have coloring supplies. I like to doodle when I'm stressed. I have a bouncy ball. I have a fidget that I can pull and tug on to help me get rid of some of my frustration. All you need to do is set a timer for 5 minutes when you feel like you need to take a break. Grab your jitter jar. Hopefully you'll be able to return to your work feeling a little bit more calm and ready to learn. I miss you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
It's hard to be at home. We sometimes worry about when we're gonna graduate. As you can see now, I just get my laptop and a hotspot. Hopefully I will do all my assignments that I haven't done yet. My hobbies, of course, done with everything, graduated. Thank you so much for helping us because we need it.
My students know that I'm still around, even if they can't see me every day, and that there's somebody that cares about them and that's thinking of them.
We'll be here any way we can to help them know that they're supported, that we love them.
There is a future worth planning and looking forward to.
We're here for our students, we love them, and we really try and do everything we can for them during this time.
More than ever, our students need us, because while school is closed, CIS is definitely open and here to support all of our students through these times.
We need you because they need us.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
Oh, great. Oh, hello?
Yep, you're on, Patrick. Go for it.
Oh, good. Good. Is this thing on? All right. Well, thanks. I hope people found that informative, and I know that's just a little snippet again of some of the work that we've been doing over the last 3 months during school closures. And again, I have to, really kind of put an emphasis on how proud I am of the work our site coordinators continue to do. And as Bill Milliken always says, the only reason why communities and schools is in schools is that's because where the kids are. Right now, the kids aren't there, so we're going to follow them. And really proud of the ability to keep doing that. So now I believe Dr. Lane is just joined us. So if I can, I would love to get him to jump on and maybe say a quick hello, and then we can make a quick Q&A, address some of the questions that all of you have had about the opening of schools and with safety and equity.
And as you have questions, feel free to, we close down the chat for just a little bit, but as you have questions, go ahead and send them over to Caitlin, actually. So you can find Caitlin in the list and just send her a quick question. She's kind of consolidating them as we go in real time. So as Dr. Lane is speaking, you can actually go ahead and we'll be able to ask those questions along the way. So without further ado, I think, let me find Dr. Lane. There we are. I think he's connecting his audio, it looks like.
Okay.
It says, nope, it says connecting to audio. Oh, there we go. Dr. Lane, you on? You're muted right now.
Yeah, I called in on my phone and I don't know why it never connected to the video, but hopefully you can hear me. Sometimes when I call in through the computer like this, it can get a little funny. So if I need,
sound great.
Well, hello everyone. I'm James Lane, Superintendent of Public Instruction at the DOE. Huge supporter of CIS, just so you know. We had CIS programs in Chesterfield, and you may or may not know, we were uniquely funded in that the school division actually put a lot of money on the table to operate CIS in Chesterfield because that's how much of a priority it was in our community. And so we were expanding several schools a year while I was there, and then now at the state continue to be a huge supporter of your work. Patrick, I heard you say that you really wanted me to say hello and do Q&A. When you sent me kind of some draft questions in advance,
yeah,
I put together a presentation on our school opening plan we announced with the governor. I could probably run through that in about 5 minutes if that would be helpful.
I mean, sure. I mean, if you think it's going to address some of these questions, that's great. I did send them the plan and I sent them your bio, so I think they have some familiarity with it. Why don't you hit the high notes, Doctor, and then we'll move on to the questions.
Yeah, so I'll run through it really quickly just so you get a sense of what to expect. Your first question was like, when will you make a decision and all that? Yeah. That's imminent, obviously, right. But I'm going to need screen sharing to show this. If somebody can make me.
There you go. Go for it.
Screen shareable. Perfect. Okay. So Tucker, I can still see you. Can you give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Yeah, good. Okay. So I'll make this a little bit bigger for you. And this is the same presentation that we're giving to the delegates, but schools will open next year, but instruction is going to look very different. All schools, unlike in the spring, are required to do new instruction. All we required when we closed schools was continuity of learning, but now they have to guarantee that kids are getting their education, whether it's in person or via remote learning. It is aligned to the Forward Virginia blueprint that the governor has put out for businesses. So when the governor says that Nova is in phase 2, then the schools are in phase 2. It scales up opportunities for in-person instruction so more and more kids get it. It addresses health and social emotional well-being of kids. But probably the most unique part about Virginia's plan compared to other states and commonwealths is that we prioritize the needs of our most vulnerable learners. So the kids that were struggling the most with remote learning get the access to in-person instruction the earliest. One thing I will mention is that all school divisions have the opportunity to be more stringent in their approach. So if they don't want to do in-person instruction at the level that we're suggesting it, they can always be more remote and more stringent in their mitigation. But just a quick rundown, in phase 1, our school divisions can begin offering in-person instruction to special education students and childcare for working families. In phase 2, we bring in the early learners because they were really struggling with remote learning. In preschool through 3rd grade, we're also allowing English language learners in phase 2. Essentially, Nova, you're Nova. You'll be in phase 2 tomorrow, so you can pretty much skip phase 1. But of course, you can still do special education in phase 2. And now you can begin offering summer camps. In phase 3, you can do in-person instruction for everybody as long as you have 6-foot social distancing. So that's going to require lower building capacities and staggered schedules. The VDOE has produced a 135-page guidance document to teach school divisions how to implement this plan. And as part of that, we have a ton of sample schedules. We will get beyond phase 3. If you heard the governor talking today, the data in Virginia looks really good. So I could see us, we had fears that phase 3 was going to be all the way when school started. It looks like we could be starting phase 3 in a matter of weeks, which means we could be beyond phase 3 even sooner than that. The school divisions ultimately, just so you know, the big summary is the school divisions ultimately are responsible for their own plans. They have to show us how they'll meet all the health mitigation strategies. They have to submit those to us before they begin operating. And so I'm not going to go through the super detailed pieces of each phase because I really gave you the high level summary, but they will have to have daily health screenings. Staff and students who are safer at home stay at home. Staff have to wear face coverings when they cannot be more than 6 feet from the students or each other. And students are only encouraged to wear face coverings. And so that's probably the fastest possible summary I could give of that without going into a lot of detail. But if you really want to get into the weeds, Recover, Redesign, and Restart is the 135-page version of this. And you'll be a school administrator by the time you're done reading it.
Well, great. Well, that's great, Dr. Lane. And you know, the questions that we've gotten from people and continue to get them are relevant to the sort of the larger topics that I sent you. And the first one really being safety, right? And so this whole issue of, you know, what happens if, right? One of them is, you know, there's always this talk of, you know, a second wave or a repeat. What's the guidance to local school systems if there is an outbreak in a school?
Yeah, so in those plans that they have to submit to us before they enter phase 2 and before they enter phase 3, and the instructional plan that they have to submit on how they're going to do instruction, they're required to outline how they're going to do new instruction with students in this hybrid model. They're required to outline how they're going to mitigate the learning loss of the spring, and they're required to create a plan that shows us how they would go immediately backwards, either in phase or all the way back to remote learning if we have a spike like that again. And that's also required in their health plans, that they have to show us that they're prepared this time so that if this happens again, there is a second spike or a spike in alignment with the flu, which is one of the issues that people are talking about. Mm-hmm. School divisions are required to create plans to tell us how they're going to do that. So we're not necessarily telling them how to do that. As you probably see throughout Northern Virginia, there's nuances to the ways that school divisions approach this. And so we still wanted to give them that flexibility while making sure that they were prepared by documenting their plans. They're also required to put these plans online and make them publicly available, so there's transparency around the process.
Okay. All right. So one of the issues that I know that you're focused on and have put a lot of consideration is this issue of equity. And so, you know, before all this happened, there was a persistent achievement gap prior to closures. what will it take, with both the school system and the community to really kind of, not to regress, and obviously if we can, to progress into this idea of equitable learning opportunities during this coming year?
Yeah, well, interesting that you asked the question, because we have all folks at all levels of government have been recommitting to our work to eradicate systemic racism from our schools. And of course, Virginia and education in general has a history, a racist history that must be taught in our schools and understood by our students and teachers. So a lot is going on, but you asked the question in a unique way where you said, what is it going to take? And so what I will tell you is it won't take one thing. It will take a lot of things. So the first thing it will take is fully funding education to the standards of quality. I see my friend Elizabeth Lodel on the call, who was part of the board that put those standards of quality together. It's going to take opening the standards of accreditation and making sure that the accreditation model is built in a way that has equity at the forefront, so that we hold schools accountable for achievement gaps. We hold schools accountable for reporting their data on how many students are getting into special programs in governor schools. And we require schools that aren't equitable to create plans to show us how they're going to change that for the future. We have to open up a civil rights investigation team at the Department of Education, actually pay for it, so that we can look at the issues going on in schools and help provide technical assistance. We got to change the way that we approach licensure, because it keeps a lot of African-American teachers especially out of our schools. And so we got to think differently about the assessment requirements. We got to think differently about the revocation requirements, because Elizabeth will tell you an inordinate amount of people that come before the board to have their license revoked are there because of minor offenses in their teens, late teens and early 20s, and now they're in their 30s and 40s and still having an answer for it. We need implicit bias training for all of our staff members. We need to make sure everyone understands the code of conduct and that it's intended to be restorative and not punitive. We need more teacher diversity. We need student boundaries to be lined in our school divisions so that our schools are diverse and we're not segregating by housing cost. We need culturally relevant teaching practices and better standards. We need all of our education prep programs and our universities to teach teachers anti-racist pedagogy and how to approach that in our schools. And we need wraparound supports like CIS to make sure that kids have what they need when they come on a daily basis, so that they are ready to learn once all of these other things are in place. So I've got a list here that's 2 more pages long that we can do to make our schools more equitable, but there's not a silver bullet. We're gonna have to do all of this hard work, and we gotta be willing to take them on one at a time.
Right. Well, thank you. Obviously, with a lot of that, not only comes the sort of the will to have those conversations and the will to make those things happen, but in the immediate, it's also a budget issue, right? And so I asked, a lot of people are asking questions of, we have to make a lot of adjustments and adaptations here coming into this year. And so how do you advise school systems around that, right? There's a lot of things that you're asking, rightly so, of the school systems in terms of plans and all those. How do you sort of square that with this idea that I know, for instance, in Arlington, they had a cut, I think, over $40 million this year out of their budget, and I'm sure Fairfax and Alexandria are confronted with the same thing.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we have to start with a clear definition of, like, that case of cutting $40 million out of their budget, exactly what that meant. Mm-hmm. So the state in February and March passed a budget that added historic new revenues to schools, $1.2 billion. And then when the novel coronavirus started to infect our communities, a lot of that funding was frozen. But there's actually really good news in that story. If you saw the governor's revenue report today, it looked way better than we thought it was going to when we were talking about this in April. But the other piece of it that's really important to note is we did not touch re-benchmarking. And so actually 800 million of the 1.2 billion in new money actually did go to school districts. And so when you saw them cutting 40 million out of their budget, that was really cutting the new money that was coming to them and the new revenues that they were intending. That the state actually really protected most of the huge new investment in schools. Now, The problem that we face is schools were underfunded before that.
Right.
New money was intended to resolve that. We
Right.
didn't even get all of the SOQs that we want, and we're still dealing with last recession's budget issues. But then what really makes next year a challenge is not the frozen money, which could come back in the special session. What really makes it challenging is to operate this hybrid schedule that we've proposed,
Right.
and you saw today. It's going to be way more expensive. And then partners like our nonprofits are finding that a lot of their, especially their business and corporate donors, are having to scale back on their investment. And so our partners are facing budget crunches. And so, you know, we've done a few things. We sent $215 million in relief money to all of our school districts with the CARES Act. We're heavily advocating for a second round of that. It's passed the House, but it's now in the Senate, which is the HEROES Act, which would drop about $170 billion in education, which is way more than we got in CARES. We think all of that's going to happen. So there's going to have to be some advocacy. And then when the General Assembly comes back, considering that revenues are a little bit better, we might be able to unfreeze some of those line items that we froze, and that could help. But ultimately, our school divisions are definitely having to make decisions with less revenue than they intended and less revenue than they're going to need to make some of these difficult decisions on how to approach school in the coronavirus. So our advocacy cannot stop.
Okay, great. You know, one of the other questions I also got a lot was, you know, how do we follow students home, right? If we're asking education now to sort of go outside the school door, right? We're doing the blended, we're doing sometimes complete. Where does the school system and partners, where does that lie in terms of providing supports to families that are now sort of obviously going to be pressed? I'm sure you hear a lot of this is like, you know, they're stressed, under-resourced. They've got a lot of families, especially the families that are under-resourced, are working 2 jobs, frontline, all that. How do you bring resources out of the school and and follow the kid back home again?
Yeah, well, so I'm going to answer the question a little. I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to answer a different version of what you were asking first, if you don't
Fair
mind.
enough.
So nothing is going to replace what school is to a kid, right? School is way bigger than teaching and learning, right? School is the place where they get, many of our students in poverty get all of their meals, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
School is a place where they get mental health services. School is a place where they get school nurse and actual health services. School is a place where students learn to socialize. School is a place where they can explore their passions in the arts and electives, which, you know, we've got to protect during this time, because that's the reason that kids want to come to school. So I'll first answer your question by saying, and I challenged the CIS of Virginia board with this when I met with them yesterday, our nonprofit community and our partners have got to think about, in addition to how we follow students home, how can we make sure that working families have childcare, right? The schools are going to have to do this staggering, but you can be the conduit to our single parent families, our students living in poverty, to find partners that are willing to help students on the hybrid days where they're having to do remote learning. And then if we can find places for students so that parents are getting back to work, because businesses are opening, parents are going to have to work.
Mm-hmm.
Then we don't have to follow them home. We can follow them to the places that we've helped them find and make sure that they're getting the supports that they need in these settings while their parents are working. But knowing that many of our students will stay home, many of our parents will also feel not comfortable sending their kids to school. First thing, and this doesn't apply to Northern Virginia in the way that applies to our rural community, but there are pockets of this in Northern Virginia. We've got to make sure that students have access to what we call the 3 essentials of digital learning. Every kid needs a device, every kid needs an internet access solution, and every kid needs a learning management system to basically run the instructional components necessary. We can have these type of meetings because we have devices with cameras and tools and the internet. You know, most families that are scared to send their kids to school are not going to have CIS spending time in their homes, because the home has become the sanctuary where they don't have to worry about the virus and other issues. And then there's a whole host of other issues. But I would say if we can get this type of experience for students during that time, you know, you as the CIS partner, your partners that you're linking to students, if we can guarantee that our students in poverty especially have those 3 essentials, we can roll out a whole set of teleservices to them that are completely impossible on phones, or even if they don't have a camera, but they have a computer. And so that we just dropped in a press release yesterday, about $28 million that schools can apply for in grants to make sure that we can start to bridge the gap for our students. The cool thing about Northern Virginia is with some small pockets, you do have access to every home. You may not have affordability to every home. Right. And there are some exceptions, obviously. But when we get down to Southwest Virginia, I mean, you can't even get an internet signal on the main roads. So forget about to the homes yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this is maybe a political statement, so I'll say it. I believe that broadband should be a public utility. Right. And I hope you'll join me in that advocacy, because I'll be working on that.
Yeah. Great. Well, one of the questions we've been getting, just as you're speaking, talking about resources, is around, you know, with this environment around law enforcement and calls for you know, discussions on racial justice. This idea of the value of having student resource officers, SROs in schools. Can you speak to that issue at all? Yeah.
Well, so every time that there's a school shooting, the money for school resource officers ramps up. Mm-hmm. And then every time that there's an issue of police brutality or the murder of a Black American, there's immediate calls to address the defunding of police has been the latest. And the governor talked about that today. What I would say is we've got to get to a point where if our school resource officers are there for campus security, that it's a clear understanding that it's talking about campus security for intruders and not campus security for the people in the building who are, you know, in general are not there to hurt each other in any way. And we've got to make sure that the school resource officers are not there to do school discipline, that they're not there to do law enforcement, that they are, if they're there to do campus security. And if they're there to do law-related education and teach kids how to be more comfortable with the law and understanding the law, I can see a role for school resource officers there. But there's no doubt that some of our students, by the nature of their backgrounds and what their families have had to deal with, experience trauma just being in the presence of a police officer. And so we're going to have to do something about that. And we're going to have to do something about making sure that the role is so clear that they are there for safety and not for these other reasons. And that's my take. You know, what community, like Charlottesville City canceled their MOU with school district with school resource officers today. But as part of that, they committed to rebuilding a future that's more appropriate. And so I think it's a local decision of whether you're going to have a school resource officer. So I wouldn't opine on whether that's appropriate, but I will say that their role needs to be clear and they need to be there for what they were intended to be there for and not for other things that end up causing issues for our students and staff.
Well, thanks. I think that really speaks just to the general temperament. I think people are taking an honest look at all of this. And so I guess to try to leave a little on a positive note, Dr. Lane, is as you look at all of this, right? I mean, as you look at this disruption, a lot of it really has to be managed very well. Where do you see the innovation taking root that might not have happened for not having this level of sort of disruption through a health pandemic?
Yeah, well, so we released our guidance document that I mentioned to you before. It was called Recover, Redesign, and Restart.
Right.
And we put that word redesign in there on purpose, that our teachers, many of our teachers were already prepared for this and had great skill, but we now basically have a little bit more certainty that all of our teachers have grown in some way in the hybrid virtual blended learning space. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to take that momentum and build on it. And one of the things that we encouraged from the department was that when schools closed, you know, this wasn't a time to just put the worksheet online and have kids working on worksheets. This was a time to really build the 5 critical skills that we think that every student needs. And that's critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, collaboration, and citizenship. And so what we tried to encourage was a lot more project-based learning. And the virtual environment and the remote environment is built for that. And kids were out exploring their neighborhoods and doing things in different ways. And what we found is, even though not every student was engaged, because not every student had the parent making sure that they were logging in, and not every teacher had the time because they had to manage their own kids to teach every day. But what we learned in some of this is that whereas there were some challenges in standing this up, the kids that really got into this virtual learning in this blended context with a more constructivist approach to it, right, with project-based learning, we saw kids that were never engaged in the school lighting up on the screen. Right. And so I think we need to find a way to build on the kids that did really well in the live environment, the kids that did really well in this new virtual environment, and then find out what we can learn about that to connect to the kids that we weren't able to be successful with in either, and make sure that we're building on this momentum for the long term.
Great. Well, I mean, as I'm sure when you talk to any school system or any region, we here in Northern Virginia, pride ourselves in being exceptional, right? I mean, we're very much invested in public education up here. We have a lot of people on tonight listening. People are invested in, and I think this idea of innovation, taking some good out of all this chaos is something that people really want to do. And I guess that leads to my final question for you, and then I'll allow you to close it out, is, what's the role for the state in all this, right? I mean, obviously, be not only just be a sort of a convener and ask people for their plans. What are some of the levers that the state can have that you think can unlock some of these issues of these ideas of innovation, whether it's graduation requirements or seat time or any of those types of things that might inhibit some of this?
Yeah, well, between the Board of Education, because the state has a lot of components to it, right? The governor has an education agenda. The General Assembly has an education agenda. The Board of Education is, the ultimate policy authority on education. And then there's the State Department of Education. And, a lot of times look at us and say, well, why aren't you creating rules that make people do this, this, and this? And the department is actually doesn't create policy, right? We work with the General Assembly and we work with the board who create the policy, and then we implement it. We've gotten into a weird space of policy creation with COVID-19 because of all of the waivers and the ways that we had to navigate. Right. But even in the waiver world, I wasn't allowed to create new rules. And so, we've worked with the board. And so the first thing you have to understand is that it's a really tangled web to do permanency. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have a clear vision for how to get there. And so what I would say the state's role is, and Elizabeth can explain this to you even better than me, I bet, but the state creates the sandbox, and then the school divisions decide how you play in the sandbox. Okay. And so when you think about the state, there are three major levers that drive this type of innovation. One is the standards of quality, which I talked a little bit about because I talked about it in the context of funding, but there's actually a lot more in the standards of quality. Two is the standards of accreditation. That's essentially what we can make schools do on a day-to-day basis instructionally. And then three is the standards, which the board is actually responsible for each of those. But the standards are what we're using to drive this change in innovation. So when the board adopted the profile of Virginia graduate, when Elizabeth was still on the board, they required us to essentially, with every standards update, embed this new innovative critical skills kind of learning into our standard. So we're still in the middle of the 7-year cycle where we're rolling out all those new standards. And so a lot of that has started to happen. We've seen a blossoming of this project-based approach. The other thing the state has done is we've taken this on from a professional development standpoint. We launched what we call the Virginia is for Learners Innovation Network. We took 26 school divisions and taught them how to teach in this innovative way in year one. Right before coronavirus, we just launched another cohort of 26, and we'll have another cohort next year. So by the end of our first 3 years, we'll have trained nearly 75 of our 132 districts on how to do this. And the idea is that they're then taking that back to their regions and training everyone else. And so the state's role is technical assistance, training, regulations, and laws. And so we frame all our work around that, and then we build a reporting mechanism around it to keep schools accountable. And so your best bet, from our standpoint, is to build excitement around this in our school divisions, which we've tried to do through the Learners Innovation Network. And once there's excitement from the superintendent, that's when things happen in schools. And that if you ever have a question in your mind, how do I make this happen in my schools? You get your superintendent excited, it tends to happen.
Right. Okay. Hey, well, Dr. Lane, I really appreciate your time. And if I can, I just want to bring this back to coming up to the new year, right? And as we look about the challenges confronting Northern Virginia and opening up our schools and keeping everybody safe, can you just give me a little reiteration of how do you see the role of communities and schools in that? Where do you see our value in making sure that this is a successful opening to the school year and a successful school year in general?
Yeah, I talked about this with Mark and the statewide board, but I see two major things that you can help with. One is helping your superintendents and your principals think through how can we ensure student engagement in this hybrid model, right? Mm-hmm. And so I hesitate to use the word attendance, because attendance people start to think of as an accountability metric. Mm-hmm. But so I don't necessarily want to say it this way, but how will you make sure students are present when they're having to learn from home on the days that they're not learning in person? And so that has, a compulsory attendance overtone to it. That has that has abuse and neglect overtones to it. But ultimately, I think that if we frame this in the positive way, it's how can we make sure that what we're doing with students is so exciting that they want to be there and they want to continue their learning even on the days when they're not with their teachers. So I think you have a huge role in helping schools to identify the students that are not engaged and be the conduit to getting them re-engaged in school. I don't want to call it attendance. I want to call it engagement. Right. And so then the second big component, I think, is your school divisions are going to be so overwhelmed trying to make sure these plans work. They need a community partner that can help them sort through this working childcare issue. Yeah. Those are the two big roles I think you can help play.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lane. I really appreciate your time tonight. And we have a lot of thoughtful questions from other people, and we'll make sure that we follow up with everybody after the event. But Dr. Lane, again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to see everyone.
All right, be well. Okay. Well, that went a little long, but I was really, great information from him, and I thought that was excellent. And again, thank you everyone here for we have plenty of things to follow up with on people for their thoughtful questions, and we'll make sure that we do that at the end, at following up over the next week or so. So really, I know we're running a little bit long, and I want to be respectful of people's time. What part of what I hope you gathered from the conversations with Dr. Lane and with the work that we've been doing, the challenges that we've been trying to address over the summer, is the challenges are only going to continue and persist, and what they look like are going to change as we go, right? The opening of schools, blended learning, helping students, not just with basic needs, but just helping the school system sort of untangle and understand where the needs are. And so that's a need. And I think he also mentioned sort of the investment that the state of Virginia has made in CIS. We started out of seed money. We started about 3 governors ago. So both Democrats and Republican governors have invested in putting us in our community. And over the last 7 years, I think we've formulated relationships enough to be able to at least be a partner in something as unpredictable as a pandemic. Having said all that, one of the things we really need is we need your help. We're asking for people to help us financially, to donate, to make sure that the money that was, as Dr. Lane says, that sort of obviously dried up on the state side and even on the local side, is now sort of going to help sort of be mitigated by the support of the community and by you. And so part of it is now more than ever campaign, which really means just they need us, we need you. They need all of us, frankly, in their lives. And so as we go through this, I really hope that you take the time to make a donation to us and to pull other people in. We will continue to communicate with you about the work that's ahead and the challenges. How this looks to students, no one knows, but we're going to continue to show you throughout the coming year. So I really appreciate anyone here and in general that would be able to help us with a donation to make sure that we can continue our work going into next year. Having said that, one of the, bringing this all back, so we started with the site coordinators. We got a little bit ahead with the state superintendent. I really want to leave this really where it belongs. And Bill Milliken has been gracious enough to bring it back to where the power really in CIS lies, which is with that student, with the voice of the student, and with the relationship that student has with CIS and a site coordinator. So if we could, Bill, I'd love to see you step in and just give us a little bit of making it real here in terms of what the value of CIS is.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to make this really short so we don't run over time, but it really, the biggest question I've been asked in the last week, and Patrick, you asked Gene and I to speak to your team about the comparison of what we went through in the late 60s, which was the predecessor to communities and schools, street academies, when the whole country was falling apart. We lost 3 great leaders to assassination. The streets were burning. Our kids were, a lot of them dead on the streets. I mean, it was terrible, but out of that came communities and schools. We were able to do a heart transplant of what we learned on the streets and bring it into the schools. And it's the same message we took in back then, that it all starts with relationships. We got to know the kids by name. We got to get them turned on to living before they get turned on to learning. That message has stayed in there the whole time. And they say, where do you have hope today? Well, we just heard hope in Dr. Lane. The fact that we have a superintendent in this state that not only knows communities and schools, but knows justice and knows the achievement gaps. They know what's happening on the ground, and we're in partnership with them. Communities and schools is called community in the schools because we're a community. Everybody that's on this gathering tonight is part of an orchestra. We all play a part. This isn't just some of us that are on boards or staff. Everybody has a role, whether it's giving a gift or mentoring or tutoring, but it's giving the community knowledge that we're all in this together. And the key to it's always been that person inside that school, that relational router, that person that we saw earlier, that is in the school, or whether school's in or school's out. We didn't go into the schools because of education. We went in because we love kids. And we wanted to see every kid get justice. The justice wasn't just for us, but for all of us. And so that's why we stayed in this battle all these years. And I'm so encouraged, in spite of the hurt and in spite of all the pain that's out there, that in the middle of that, we're on the forefront, and that the coalition of people, of black, white, and brown, and rich and poor, and faith people and non-faith people, older, younger, all coming together at this time through this crisis, saying we need each other more than ever. And every national meeting I'm on, we're being asked to do more, not cut back. They want us in more schools because we're on the ground. And that site coordinator is that person who is like the nurse doing triage. When you go to a hospital, some of the kids need a mentor, some need to be connected to technology. Whatever their need is, whatever it takes, we're going to be there with the kids, whether it's the time they're in school or on the streets. So we're going to end this with getting to hear from what is the key person in all the communities and schools, and we have an army of them around the country that are those on the front line, loving kids into change, making sure everything they need is taking place so that they have hope in the future. And I literally am full of pain, but I'm also full of hope, because this next generation, I think, may be one of the great generations that's going to come out of this. And I know CIS is going to be with them. And you're going to hear from one of the in the film, Zoe, who's going to introduce Kathy, one of the students, which is what it's all about. So thank you all for being part of this. We're in this till we're in a funny farm.
So this year I've been working with Kathy, and she's really just such an articulate and smart young lady. And I've just seen so much growth from her, and I'm so proud of how she's invested her time during this closure of schools. I really haven't seen her skip a beat. She's just gotten so involved with everything that we've been offering, and I'm just really excited to see where she goes next year and follow her to graduation.
Hi, my name is Kathy Hernandez. I am a junior at Wakefield High School. Working with Ms. Marquise has really helped me out personally by being able to talk to her. Her being there has really helped me a lot, knowing that there is someone there that can help me through everything that's happening at the moment. I want to be able to open up my own business when I get older. Being able to be confident and talk to new and different people as well as professionals really helps me out in the future. So I know you might be thinking that CIS, oh, it's just something that they want to put me in and it's going to embarrass me or something, but it's honestly the best decision I've ever made. Being a part of it really helped me out. I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done for me, and I know at times I could have been a little annoying, always bugging you with asking for help, but I'm very happy I got to know you, and I'm glad that I know you now.
Well, that's everything. And so I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. I appreciate the voices of people asking questions and engaged in this process. It goes on. This is an ongoing piece. And the thing I'm most proud about with CIS is every school that we've come into, we haven't left. We're committed to staying with our kids and reaching more. So with your help, we can do that. I know there are some people that would be interested in talking with some of our site coordinators. You saw them in the video in the beginning. You saw Zoe. We have them here. I hope we can find a way, if you're interested, to be able to put you in a breakout room to ask any questions you wish of them. And know that we'll be in touch. We'll continue to communicate with you, and I hope you continue to engage with us. And we really are generally grateful for your time and your support. So thank you.
Patrick, thank you so much. And I just want to let you know the link to donate, if you're so inclined to be a part of our community of courageous, generous givers, is up in the chat. And if you would like to actually connect with the site coordinator literally right now, you are able to do that and just ask questions. If you're curious about communities and schools, what's going on, what is really happening in on the ground, I can literally put you into a breakout into a whole other world in Zoom. It's very easy. So all you got to do is just shoot me a quick message in the chat, and you can and I can send you over into a breakout room with another site coordinator. So I just want to say before we close, if you don't mind, Lucinda, I will put you in a breakout room. Yes. If you don't mind, I'd love for you to just briefly reflect on this experience and just what was the most meaningful or valuable part of it for you today? And put that in the chat. What was the most meaningful or valuable part of this experience? This is helping us to learn. We want to do more of these types of experiences because they're informational. They help people, help us all move forward. And the more we can share, the more powerful all of us are together. And so if you don't mind, put what was powerful or what was the most meaningful or valuable part of this for you? And just pop that up in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to create a few breakout rooms. So forgive me while I do a little bit of tech at the same time. And for those of you who need to go, feel free to give us a wave, say goodbye. And we'll see you at the next part of this series of having different informational meetings that we're doing.